Hello, everyone. Well, why don't we get started? The pages? Chapter 3. The machine heaved up, belched steam and grime, and crashed back down. I stumbled, and pain shot down my leg. I must have twisted and sprained my left foot. I couldn't put pressure on it. Nails popped, cables snapped, steam lashed at the walls. The chains slammed against me, and I screamed. It wrapped around my body and threw me across the floor toward a large hole in the middle of the tangled metal. How could it have picked me up? With my head hanging over the hole, I braced myself for the worst. The reek of phosphorus came near to making me vomit, and I gagged for breath. This had to be where Jacobs dumped the phosphorus, the food for the beast. Beneath me, in the pit, valves clanked open and shut. Steam hissed through the pipes, and liquid metal sparked like lightning bugs. A white mist glowed, and ghostly it was, and it swirled up in fingers that nearly touched my face. Another blast of garlic hit me and I recoiled, forcing my body back a few inches. Everything on my left side hurt from my shoulder to my foot. I didn't know better. I think the machine had been angered and wanted me dead. And yet it wasn't alive. How could it want to kill me? Holmes! Where's Holmes? Slowly I crawled toward the hole, tilting my body to keep most of my weight off my injured left side. Then I rose, bent at the waist, and hobbled beneath the steam pipes that snarled and beat each other like boxers. Someone wrapped an arm around my waist. Jacobs steered me toward the door. Even in the dark, he said. I know every inch of this place. Me dad told me. Get to know it, son. The beast will be your only friend, your only companion, your only life. Above us, fire sizzled and whipped, and for a moment the walls were draped in white and orange light. Peering around for Holmes, I shrank back from the brightness, shielding my eyes with my arm, and I tripped over a softness, small, like a baby. It squinted down at a bone. I stooped and plucked up the bone, hard as steel now, almost spherical, its surface chiseled with numbers and symbols. It was just like the bone that Willie Jacobs found after his father died, but this bone bore different symbols. I stashed it in my pocket, then glanced around frantically. Holmes! Holding up an arm to shield my eyes from the light, I peered to the left, then to the right. Perhaps the beast has killed Holmes. What was happening to me? I was thinking like Willie Jacobs. Holmes, I shouted. Where are you? The third bone spit up by the beast since me dad died, Jacobs said fervishly. And what any of them means I don't know. I give you one, I give the employee the second, and now you have this one too. In a state of confusion, I staggered toward him. A machine doesn't kill anyone, I told myself. Not on purpose. Men kill on purpose. At that moment, Holmes appeared from the rear of the clattering Leviathan. He grabbed us both and pushed us toward the door. I was never so glad to see my friend as in that moment. It was then that the floor ruptured. It vomited rock, and I jumped, pain shooting down my injured leg. My ankle gave out, and I fell back against the wall, just as the machine hurled a metal sheet at my head, serrated on the edge, sharp as a razor. I'd barely avoided decapitation. A huge hydraulic pump banged up and down, a morbid growth with hemorrhoid arms, and its lesions and polyps burst in fireworks of pus. Molten drips burned my scalp and shoulders, my face prompting me to move. I limped as quickly as I could, holding on to my two companions and steeling myself against the pain. Almost to the door now. Almost there. The machine blocked our way. Sprouting out of nowhere, it seemed, were massive new limbs. Hoses, cables, pipes, axles, belts, wheels, cylinders, connected in steel formations. Yet I couldn't see from where they came. Thank you, Zay, for the bonk. I told you the beast, Jacob screamed. It's alive, and it wants us dead. It's a killer, the beast. Holmes seized the man by both shoulders and shook him, yelling above the thundering steel. It's not alive, you fool, he shouted. Good morning, good morning. I hope you're having a good day so far. I'm gonna try to speak in this tone. Nice little ASMR noises for you. So. It's the natural malfunction with natural cause. It is alive. The cause ain't nothing natural, Jacob shrieked. A chat stream isn't on. Oh, hold up. Let me fix that real quick. There it is. Thank you for that. Let me double check this. And we're good. Alrighty. Now we can see you talking. Okay, where were we? It is alive. The cause ain't nothing natural, Jacob shrieked. My dad near told me that what if the beast turned on murderous, he pointed. I swear on me life. There were only 20 rods on them pistons only yesterday. Now, there's 28. I tell ya, it's growing. Thank you for the lurk. He broke free from Holmes. I'm on lol. Oh, I see. Have fun in League. Excuse me. With no one to help me walk, I doubled over in pain. Through the corner of my eye, I saw Jacobs, bathed in light when the machine flashed fire, cloaked in darkness when the fire subsided. His fingers groped the stone wall near his sleeping blankets. The machine growled. Its limbs quivered. Darkness. Holmes had his arm around me, pushing me toward the door. Come, Watson. We must get out of here. The quicker the better. Light. A flash to Jacob's face. Insanity and glee. That's when I saw the gold on the floor. Chunks like gravel, but glimmering and lustrous. Definitely gold. None of this made sense. The machine gone wild, the bones, the gold. Holmes reached for the door pulley and cranked up the heavy door. As he did so, Jacob scooped up the gold and dumped it into his pocket, then raced after us. The machine thrashed and strands of fire whipped around the room. 3 of us staggered outside, and then Jacobs pulled the door down. Embedded into the wall by the door was a metal press pad composed of numbers. I'd never seen such a thing. From the other side, the machine screamed and banged. The door shook. It sensed the beast's power. The steel straining against the walls, trying to break free. Continuous attack. Tons of steel. Machine God makes me think of anime Bofree. Also, the story of Don Quixote is really good. Thank you. We're in chapter 3 now, so as a heads up, Lunar, the machine that they were sent to investigate has quote-unquote come alive. So, these numbers, they do what? Lock the door somehow? Holmes said. Jacobs nodded, his eyes clouded with worry. What are the numbers? Holmes demanded. Past through the generations, I can't tell you. Tell me. Holmes raised a fist to the man's face. Let me go, I'll do it. Jacob's fingers shook as he pressed numbers on the metal pad in precise patterns. 3 0 0 0 0 0 4 3 7 5 0 0 1 9 7 2 0 7 82 79 18 16. And the lock clicked. It was astonishing. We must shut down that machine. It must be shut down permanently, Holmes said. Ain't no way to turn it off, Jacob said. What if you stop providing steam? No electricity, no phosphorus. It won't matter none. Once it's running, it don't stop. Denying it food only makes it angry. Makes things worse. Holmes suddenly gasped. We must return to Whitechapel High Street, where the tram runs, where all the people are, at once. Instantly, I knew what he meant. Go! Run ahead, Mr. Jacobs, he commanded, and get everyone off the trams, now! Jacobs raced ahead, while Holmes helped me limp back toward Osborne Street, and ultimately to Whitechapel High Street. My leg and foot hurt too much for me to hurry. I hobbled as best as I could. My physical injuries tormented me less than my mental anguish. How on earth could such a thing happen, Holmes? I asked. Could Jacobs have tampered with the machine, so it appeared alive and wild? No, Holmes replied. Jacobs wouldn't know how. Besides... Lost my place, one moment. He's not the type, nor is he the sort to kill his own father, then seek help in finding the killer. What then? This time, Holmes didn't answer. He steered me along, maintaining his silence, a deep frown on his forehead, lips pursed, eyes glowing. Dizzy. I didn't feel like myself. It was as if the world had blurred, as if cotton filled my brain, as if my thoughts were in tune with the dark clouds. I tried shaking my head, but it didn't clear. My ankle swelled as I walked, and my shoe felt tight. I ignored the pain. I was good at ignoring pain. I'd learned well during my stint in Afghanistan. Holmes and I slipped under the tram wires and wooden poles, then we were by the fish shore. Women pawed through sardines and haggled over bread. Hot tar bubbled on the pavement and stuck to my shoes. I had to yank them up, making my ankle hurt even more. As we neared the tobacco shop, I thought I glimpsed Mary down the street near a cart stacked with what looked like liquor bottles. She waved and smiled, and my heart beat faster. With Holmes at my side, I rushed toward the cart. Suddenly, life felt a bit better. Mary was here. But why? Why would Mary come here? He knows how dangerous it is. Where's Samuel? I clutched Holmes' coat. Hello, Vinny. Good morning. How are you doing? Glad you could join us for a little ASMR reading time of Sherlock Holmes versus Cthulhu. We are now on chapter 3. And Holmes, good morning, I'm tired, but I'm good. That's good to hear. Holmes and Watson have escaped the machine that's supposedly eating people. So, that will continue. I clutched Holmes' coat. We glanced at each other, and I could see the concern in his eyes. Yet, despite my fear and the sheer horror of my situation, people moved past as if in slow motion. My ears buzzed. I shook my head, swallowed, blinked hard. Nothing helped. Alright, Vinny. Thank you for tuning in. It can't be here, Mary. Mary is safe at home. The woman who looked like Mary turned, and I saw that she held a baby in one arm. Samuel. Holmes, I said. Steady, Watson, Holmes said. Just then, a tram buzzed around the corner so fast that I barely saw the wheels, the steps, or the faces. The overhead wires sizzled. Then people screamed. Oh, thank you, thank you. Men rushed from buildings to see what was happening. It was just like inside the building when the beast went wild. The fire whipped around against the liquor cart, which went up in flames. Time cracked from slow to fast, and now slow again. The tram tottered, its red and white paint melting in the fire. The wooden structure a bonfire. Then the whole blazing thing fell over. I froze in place, unable to grasp the enormity of what was happening. 3 women and 2 children rolled from the tram, screaming, trying to bat the fire off the bodies. Something struck the back of my head, and I cried out as my vision blurred. Grasping my head, I turned to see a fallen tram pole, and the neon light filled my eyes. I fought to retain my balance. While Willie Jacobs stood near the fire, his face white and his mouth open wide in horror. A mother clawed at her small son. She wailed. Then her hands melted, and the child's face melted. All the bodies were still, skin and fat and organs aflame. And then, only bones. All around me, a flurry of women gasped and slapped their hands over their mouths. Workmen beat down the flames with their coats. One dumped a bucket of water on the burning corpses, but the flames only roared higher. The screams. Oh, the screams. As if hell itself had crackled out of the spiderweb wires, and the cables had unleashed itself upon the city. I stumbled forward. My eyes burned from the ash. And no matter how much I blinked, I couldn't erase the neon from my vision. My body shook. I wanted to die. Not them. Not my family. Not. I could have let myself think it. Not. Yet there it was, the thought surfacing against my will. Oh, please, not Mary and Samuel. Oh, please, let them be alright. Let me die. Let me die instead. The pain bottled out anything I might have felt in my head, leg, or ankle. Physical sensations were nothing compared to the pain in my soul. It was as if my head had cracked open, split wide with an axe. As if Satan himself had driven a spike into my heart. It was as if God had died. I saw blood everywhere, the soft flesh and the filthy swaddling cloth. Oh no, not the baby. Not the baby. Hush, Samuel. Daddy won't let anything happen to you. I sank to my knees. It played over and over like a bad song in my head. A woman's corpse lay in a pool of liquor, marinating in the fire. I covered my eyes with my hands. I couldn't bear to look at her. Couldn't bear to see the bones, the blood, the mush of what was left of her face and body. Turning slightly, I peered through my tears at Holmes, who tossed off his top hat, stripped off his black coat, and slapped at the fire. Exhausted, he slumped to the ground. The woman burned until I saw the last wisp of flesh curl into the smoke, and she was nothing but bones, black and charred upon the dirt of the street. Then I cried. I couldn't stop crying. Where was Samuel? Was he gone too? There he was. A baby was on top of the nearly destroyed cart that had held liquor. He was so small, my heart seized up. Oh, so small. Only the size of a whiskey bottle. I reached for him. The body fell into my arms. 2 weeks old. And now dead. His face had melted, the flesh black on his bones. I cradled what was left of him in my arms. Holmes lifted me and put an arm around my shoulder. Still, I clutched Samuel to my heart. Holmes nodded to someone, and a woman with brown velvet eyes gently took the baby. Then Holmes draped a cloak over to me to shield my eyes, and he coaxed me into a cab. Jacobs found 3 spherical bones, Watson, in addition to what remained of his father. You hear? Yes, I heard Willie Jacobs carrying on about the beast spitting out 3 spherical bones. The newspapers had reported that various numbers of the weird spheres were found near each body. What did it all mean? At the moment, it didn't matter much to me. Take him, Holmes said to someone. My family? I whispered, but Holmes was already gone. The cart bumped along the road. Spiderweb wires sparked overhead. I slumped on a cushion, the color of blood. My head throbbed. My eyes ached. Then all went dark. Chapter 4. A moment. They really love mowing grass right now. I'm glad. I don't know if y'all can hear it, but it is ridiculously loud. Anyway, Chapter 4. Voices flickered like shadows. Words tumbled around the room, meaningless syllables. I didn't know the time nor where I was. The words grew louder and more strident. As I came to my senses more fully, I found that I was laying in a bed and that 3 men were arguing nearby. I abandoned my nightmares and listened. One voice had the accent of an educated man. Spoke quickly and with elegance, the words smooth and never rising in pitch. Holmes, I realized. The second man's voice was guttural and harsh, as if he smoked too much. The third voice was as cultured and educated as Holmes, yet deeper, almost a baritone. I tell you, Willie Jacobs is to blame. The guttural voice. Going to prosecute. He'll spend the rest of his miserable life in jail. Fist pounded what might be a table, and my eyes popped open. You will do nothing, Harold, Holmes said. You love mowing grass, so I can see the story going that direction. Yeah, no. The maintenance people are mowing grass right outside my apartment window. And, like, it just so happened to start, like, 5 minutes before the stream. And it's been 20 minutes, and they're still mowing grass, even though there's, like, maybe 10 feet of it. It's ridiculous. Okay. Let me take a quick sip of water real quick. Okay. That's Detective Bentley to you, Holmes. As you wish, Detective Bentley. You will do nothing to Mr. Jacobs. But it was murder. Manslaughter at minimum. He bears no responsibility for these deaths. He himself just lost his father, his only family. Give the man time to heal. Good morning, Borger. Hope you're having a lovely morning so far. We are now in Chapter 4, Sherlock Holmes vs. Cthulhu. So, won't you join me? Willie Jacobs would never heal. Of that, I was certain. I stared at the ceiling, plaster swirls, painted angels, cherubs. Where was I? Yeah, no, I feel that, Lunar. It's pretty ass to, like, trying to sleep and you just hear nothing but, like, lawn work. Where was I? This wasn't Baker Street, nor was it the humble flat I shared with Mary and Samuel. Rolling to my left side, I buried my face in the pillow. A duck feather mattress cradled my aching body. I pulled the blanket to my chin, and the cloth was softer than Samuel's cheek. We have to get to the bottom of this, Mr. Holmes. Too many people died, and God only knows how many are going to be killed. No one knows how the machine works. People are furious, and with good reason. You're right about that, Detective, Holmes said. The machine must be shut down. As yet, however, no one knows it well enough to do so, but I assure you, sir, I will have an answer. Do you have any idea how the machine works? And how to fix it? The third man said, the baritone. I do not yet know, Professor Fitzgerald, Holmes said. I pictured his eyes sharp and gray, and his steepled fingers with their tips upon the lower edge of his mouth. Theodore Jacobs built it based on interpretations of drawings and symbols that his ancestors found on animal hide. It's not a simple matter to decipher these symbols, but in time, I'm sure to make sense of them. After a moment, he added, "Where are the drawings, Professor?" "What makes you think I have them?" the baritone said. "Come now, sir, we're both intelligent men. You seem not in the least bit surprised when I mentioned ancient drawings and symbols that enable a modern man to construct a powerful machine. You already knew about Jacobs and his machine and the drawings, didn't you?" A low chuckle. "You have me, Mr. Holmes. Yes, Jacobs told me about the machine and his ancestors' drawings." "And you financed his experiments?" The other man was quiet. This time, it was Holmes who chuckled. "You're obviously a wealthy man, Professor, with sufficient funds to finance the construction of such a machine, and after all those deaths, you still prefer to see it repaired rather than destroyed." "I may have given the poor man some money, yes. I give to many, Mr. Holmes. I am a generous man, a man of morals and principles, as I'm sure you are. As for destroying the machine, if we use explosives, we risk killing many more. I know not how to turn off the machine, but it would be a far safer option." "And the ancient drawings, Professor Fitzgerald? Where are they?" "I have them. They're safe." "This talk is all fine and dandy," Detective Bentley interjected, "but you understand, gentlemen, that I must put your man in jail until the public uproar dies down. He'll have to stay there until we work this out. Between you and me, I think Willie Jacobs is guilty as sin." "He knew the risk, he and his father," the detective continued. "We talked to the father about this a while back. They knew there was no way to turn off the machine or monitor what it was doing. This was all some grand experiment gone wrong. It killed Theodore Jacobs, and now it's responsible for the deaths of many innocent citizens. Why did they do it? The answer is obvious. Money. It always boils down to greed, doesn't it, Mr. Holmes?" "On the contrary, Mr. Jacobs and his father didn't live in great luxury. They owned virtually nothing beyond their blankets and filthy clothes. I wonder, Professor, what did you pay them and where did the money go?" "Provided the resources needed for the construction and paid them a fair, if modest, living wage. What they spent it on, or what they did with it, is not my concern. They lived in my machine house as well, and for a very small rent, I might add." At that, I thought about the gold nuggets Jacobs had scooped from the floor by the machine. I wondered if this was the wealth, the greed, that had motivated Jacobs and his father to build an experimental steam-powered tram in a poor part of town. Instantly, I rejected the idea. Jacobs and his father slept on the floor of a filthy machine room and clearly didn't have the money for decent meals, baths, or fare for carriages. That was the case, though. Then from where had the precious metal come? It was most confusing and my head began to ache again. "None of this is relevant," Bentley said, his voice adding to the pain. "Willie Jacobs is responsible for the tram deaths and for that machine, and I say he killed his father and needs to go to jail. That's what matters here." "He did not kill his father," Holmes said firmly. "Besides, we need him. No one else has a clue how to shut down the machine." I pulled myself to a sitting position and rubbed my eyes. I was anxious to find out how long I'd been unconscious. I was also anxious to help Holmes, but most important, to know what had become of Mary and Samuel. Oddly, my cheeks were clean-shaven. I wore silk pajama tops and bottoms that were much too large for me. My skin smelled of pine-scented soap. I led my feet to a red and white marble floor. The tiles were cool and arranged like a jigsaw puzzle into an elaborate pattern. My ankle was no longer swollen, but just slightly purple from the injury. I glanced around the room. There was a tapestry on the wall, a hunting scene, with noblemen on horses. A damask chair that had to date back hundreds of years, but the chair was a pair of slippers. Red plush with fur lining. Embroidered on the top of each slipper were the letters HF. This must be Professor Fitzgerald's home, I thought. Donning the slippers and a matching robe, I twisted the gold knob on the bedroom door, which opened slightly. For a moment, I stood transfixed. The door was 6 inches thick, solid wood, inlaid with gold filigree and cherubs. The room on the other side of the door was even more ornate. It smelled of leather and cigar smoke. Bottles of liquor glittered on immense wooden tables overlaid in gold filigree. Carved cabinets flanked the walls, and books and bottles, jars, statues filled the shelves. Red, white marble columns stretched from the oriental rug to the ceiling. Then there was the paintings. Clearly not portraits of anyone's ancestors, nor of pastoral settings. Illustrated in rich colors that caught the light as if it made from unknown substances, the subjects were multi-limbed, robed, and holding strange metal objects. Stepping through the doorway, I almost knocked over a silver tray heaped with freshly cut twigs and leaves. Fumbling with it, I pushed it back on the table. Another gilt-infused piece of furniture that looked as if it belonged in the king's palace 500 years ago. My actions attracted attention. Ah, Dr. Watson, join us, will you? Professor Henry Fitzgerald stood by a marble fireplace that reached to the ceiling. Given the recent events, I was glad to see that the fire was dead. Fitzgerald puffed on a slim cigar and trained his huge black eyes on me. Sit beside me, Watson. Take it you're feeling better? Holmes smiled for a minute. The expression vanished from his face. It was as warm a smile as one could get from him. I was gratified. He gestured at a plush chair to his right. I'm glad to be awake again, I said. Abruptly, the room went fuzzy, weak, numb. I fell into the chair. Waves of dizziness flushed through me and my stomach lurched. Across the room, the professor lifted a plate of sweet cakes and waved it in my direction. Something to eat, perhaps? No, I said, thank you. Brandy? A stiff drink might help. Whiskey will do, I answered. Fitzgerald stuck his cigar in an ashtray and poured a glass of whiskey for me. Harold Bentley perched on a chair that looked like a throne. He was a rumpled man, graying whiskers, a tangle of brown hair, dark eyes set too close together. He wore wrinkled trousers, a stained shirt, and an orange tie. Henry Fitzgerald handed me the whiskey, then returned to the fireplace and his cigar. He tilted his head and puffed a few rings of smoke toward a painting of a freakish creature holding a metal box with gears on it. Bentley pulled a crooked cigarette from his shirt pocket. I think that Watson is just suffering from PTSD from seeing burning corpses. Vegeta versus Cthulhu? Wouldn't that be fantastic? Take another drink right quick. Bentley pulled a crooked cigarette from his shirt pocket, struck a match, and sucked in smoke, then immediately started coughing. He didn't seem to care, however. He hacked, then smoked again. He was a nervous wreck. Why they kept a man this edgy on the police force was a wonder. Given his record, it's downright absurd. Professor Henry Fitzgerald was anything but nervous, and definitely not a wreck. In his mid to late 30s, he wore his hair tucked behind his ears and draped to his chin. It was clipped to perfection, not a strand out of place. Shoes were spotless, as if they were new. His shirt and trousers were both black knits, loose and comfortable, yet impeccable in their fit. I lifted the glass to my lips and the whiskey burned down my throat. A slight numbness spread through my arms and chest. It felt good. Fitzgerald stared at Bentley, then spoke. You're wasting my time, Harold. Let's get down to the matter at hand or dispense with this little soiree, shall we? Come on, the detective protested. Don't talk to me like that. I'm here on police business. Show some respect. It has nothing to do with respect. It has to do with murder. I believe there have been other occurrences elsewhere. I believe the murders are connected. What makes you think that? Holmes asked. Is there another machine? Where's Willie Jacobs? I said to Holmes. Holmes didn't look at me. Curtly, he answered. He's missing, Watson. The police are on a manhunt at this very moment. Now tell me, Professor, where have these other killings occurred? And do you have evidence of another machine such as the one Willie Jacobs maintained? None of which I'm aware, Fitzgerald replied. I financed only the one here in London. 2 years ago, he continued, a colleague of mine, Dr. Von Loom, called upon me in Avebury, where my ancestral home is located. He spoke of these mysterious drawings, possessed by the Jacobs man, Willie's father. I was intrigued. Have there been any similar deaths in Avebury? Holmes asked sharply. Ooh, that does sound very nice. I prefer sweet drinks. I don't know, possibly, the professor said. People die all the time, but there's no experimental tram machine there. None. Holmes persisted. Then these other possible deaths you mentioned, they took place elsewhere. What do you know of them? Fitzgerald remained calm despite the questioning. Nothing tangible, I'm afraid. Just rumors, he said. People gossip in the pubs, and while I can't verify what they say, I've heard talk of a criminal lunatic, of people who have vanished as far away as the northern border and the eastern shore, of bodies. Drink the rest of my whiskey. Where's my family, Holmes? I asked, the memory suddenly flashing back. They died, I cried. They died, didn't they, Holmes? No, they're safe, Watson, he replied. Following the incident, I put them in a cab back to your flat. You had been knocked unconscious. Hudson is keeping your wife apprised of your condition. I don't understand, I said, shaking my head and immediately regretting it. What was Mary doing in that part of town? He didn't answer. I could see that something was bothering him. What is it? I prompted. What's wrong? Is it Mary? Mary is fine, as is Samuel, he said. We'll speak later. That he turned away. Holmes was concealing information. I didn't know why. It was frustrating, but I knew better than to press him. I changed the subject. How long have we been here? I asked. I assume this is Professor Fitzgerald's home? I managed to smile to our host, and he revealed that Holmes and I had been staying with him for the past day and a half while I healed. My staff has cared for all of your needs, he added. The day before yesterday, I came upon the horrible scene in the marketplace, only to find Mr. Sherlock Holmes ragged and exhausted, sorry. Oh, thank you, Vinny, for reminding me to drink water. Take another drink real quick. Soaked in blood, and you, sir, were in a terrible state. It seemed only right that I should have my carriage bring you here, where my private physician, Dr. Stoutgarten, could tend to you. This was most kind, I murmured. Yes, I know of Dr. Stoutgarten. Most esteemed, thank you. Bentley hacked on cigarette smoke, hoisted himself from the chair, and tossed a spent cigarette into the fireplace. I must go, gentlemen, he said, the words rasping in his throat, and help find this Willie Jacobs. He's done enough damage. By God, I don't want anyone else hurt. Well, I sensed a small amount of sincerity in his voice. I also suspected that catching Willie Jacobs would lead to a tidy reward, or perhaps a promotion. Bentley was the sort of man you shared drinks with at the local pub. You beat him at darts. He beat you at billiards, and he wasn't very good at his job. We first encountered him when he refused to lock up Timothy Dorsey, a thug whose violent tendencies began in his teens. By the time he was in his mid-20s, Dorsey had turned a pastime into a profession. Steal a penny just so he could shove it down someone's throat for a laugh. Holmes had pinned several murders on the man, but Bentley claimed there wasn't enough evidence to lock him up, much less convict him. I wondered where Inspector Lestrade would come on the scene and take this current case away from the bumbling detective who really wasn't up on the task. Fitzgerald pressed a button by the fireplace, and a bell sounded in the distance. Detective, please make sure everyone in the city avoids the trams, he said. No one is to get on them or go near them. Send men out to cut any wires leading to the machine. Do you understand? It seemed to me that he spoke as if to a child. Yes, I understand, Bentley growled. I need to talk to you again, Professor. I'm not sure what you mean by these other killings. Set up north and to the east? But first things first. He glanced at Holmes and then at me. They can be dealt with after things settle down a bit here in my own jurisdiction. A maid arrived to lead the detective from the house. She was young, maybe 20, with a kind face, wearing a long black dress and a white apron. Wisps of red hair peeked from beneath a black cap. Her eyes were soft, like brown velvet. I remembered those eyes. This was the woman who had taken the dead baby from my arms. The baby I thought was Samuel. She smiled at me, but I looked away. The memory was too fresh. Chapter 5. More killings? Professor had said. I wondered how many more babies and mothers had died, how many elderly and children. Was Fitzgerald right? Was a criminal lunatic on the loose? Was Holmes wrong about the arcane spheres? Had a Ripper-like killer planted them? My head reeled. I wanted to go back to the bed's soft blanket, but first I needed to ask the professor and Holmes a few questions. Why would anyone kill so many people, seemingly at random, I asked. There are no answers yet, Holmes said. The trip to Everbury might be in order, though. For now, Watson, you must rest. I need you in your best condition. Before I can rest, Holmes, I must have some answers, I countered, beginning with Mary and Samuel. Why were they by that liquor cart? What could have possessed Mary to follow us? Holmes stared for a moment at Professor Fitzgerald. Promise me, Watson, that you'll remain calm. Instantly, I felt anything but calm. What is it? I demanded. Tell me! Your wife had a visitor, Holmes answered. He arrived after we left your flat. Who? Here. Look at this note, Watson. Holmes pulled a scrap of paper from his pocket and thrust it at me. I rose, my legs shaking, and took the note from him. I sank back into my chair. Dearest love, come quickly. I need you. I'm injured and can't be moved. Come immediately to Randolph's Cigars and Fine Liquors on Whitechapel High Street. Don't hesitate for any reason. Your loving husband, John. But I didn't send this, I exclaimed. What is it? You recognize the handwriting? Holmes asked. I stared at the lettering. It resembled my handwriting, but it missed a mark ever so slightly. I wondered if even Mary would know the difference. It's very similar to mine, I said. Who forged it and for what purpose? Holmes plucked the note from my hand and studied it for a moment, then tucked it back into his pocket. Fitzgerald sat quietly the whole time, but his eyes darted to Holmes, and I could tell he was keenly interested. Apparently, a carriage followed us to your flat, my friend said. Sometime after we left, the driver gave this note to your wife. Thinking you had written it, she grabbed the baby and immediately left with the driver. He took her to Randolph Cigars and Fine Liquors. He did all of this because she thought you needed her. She never would have gone there otherwise. When the tram caught fire, she raced off with Samuel. A policeman later brought her to my attention. I sent her home. A chill swept down me, and I began to shake. But who wrote the note, Holmes? Who was the driver? Holmes frowned. Finally, he spoke. I recognize the writing, Watson, disguised as it is to closely resemble your own. He came to your home and to your wife. He brought her to a part of town where 4 people have just been murdered and where she and your son might have been harmed or even killed. Yet she fared well and was not injured. Despite the magnitude of danger, I believe her presence there was orchestrated to send us a message. But what message, Holmes? It throbbed. Tell me! This man doesn't want you working with me again. Not on this case. Had we not seen her, the message would have been the same once we learned of the note and her excursion. He deduced that I would be in that area, however, for he is clever and perhaps glimpsed our visitor, Willie Jacobs, the other night. This is a warning, Watson, that if you want to continue to work with me, your wife and baby... He didn't have to finish. I knew what he meant. Professor Fitzgerald stirred in his chair by the fireplace. And who is this forger, Mr. Holmes? He asked, as it seemed as if he might already know the answer, but I still hadn't a ghost of a clue. There's only one man I know who would put himself against me in such a vile way, Holmes said, his voice cold. One man who could forge handwriting so well that even your wife could not tell. That man is Professor Moriarty. What? I exclaimed. No, it can't be. Holmes had mentioned Moriarty to me, and I knew he considered the professor a most dangerous adversary, his rival in both skill and intellect. Yes, Holmes said now, it can be, and it is. Abruptly, Fitzgerald jumped from his chair. Beginning, he rang for the maid and then swiveled back to face us. So this is progress, eh, Mr. Holmes? He said strangely. This Moriarty is a criminal mastermind, then. He must be behind the murders. He turned to me. As for you, Dr. Watson, perhaps you are indeed better off staying home and protecting your family. Rochelle's reaction was odd, to say the least. Even so, he made a good point. Certainly, I couldn't let anything happen to Mary and Samuel. The tram fire incident had been terrifying enough, even though... Excuse me. Sorry. Even before it emerged, the criminal mastermind had successfully taken Mary and Samuel under false pretenses, a man whose skills had earned him the respect of Sherlock Holmes. Fear gripped me at such that it made my mind reel. The mother and baby he burned to death. They could have been Mary and Samuel. Holmes, I said softly. How can I continue? This time his answer was swift. You must, he said. You have no choice. We must stop this killer, and for that to occur, I shall need your help, Watson. I trust you as I trust no other. And due to the bizarre nature of these murders, I may need your medical insight as well. Maybe need you to divert attention while I seek clues. I'll get Lestrade to put a police guard outside your home. Then they'll protect your family, night and day. I promise, he added. At that moment, the maid entered. Holmes flicked his fingers, gesturing at her to help me back to the bedroom. Fitzgerald nodded. Yes, please help Dr. Watson back to bed. He turned to me. We'll get to the bottom of this, my man, he said. Go, get some rest. Nodding, I rose, my legs shaking. With the help of Holmes and the maid, I stumbled back through the doorway into the bed. Tucked me beneath the blanket, and I sank back to sleep. Later, the red-headed maid propped me up in bed and spooned beef hash and potatoes in my mouth. The food made me drowsy again, and as soon as she left, sleep took me. This time into a nightmare, just a constant replaying of the fire. Samuel was there, limp, with drops of blood falling from his tiny dead face. Over and over the image played, the wrinkled little face, the eyes glazed, the little hands utterly still. The image loomed bigger and bigger. Samuel dead. It was all my fault. I sat up, drenched in sweat, and clasped my chest as if this might reduce the pain, but it didn't. I slicked the hair from my eyes. My body was cold, and I started shivering violently. I must have called out, for the maid entered. "You've had a nightmare, sir. You're sweating." She leaned over and wiped my forehead with a soft cloth. Yes, I'm so very sorry. I had to gather my wits. I'd be of no use to Holmes or my family this way. Death had never affected me quite this much. I was used to the dying and to death. Yet this time it hit me much harder. This time it involved Mary and Samuel. But they hadn't died, had they? No. I had to shake those loose nightmares, to return to myself strong and calm. The maid cleared her throat, hesitated, and then spoke. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's a man here," she said. "Holmes is with him, and he insists that you come. He needs you," he says. "Who's there?" I sputtered. "Is it Lestrade?" She just shrugged, and I said, "Please, get cold water for my face, and I want my own clothes. Some bread, please, and my cigarettes, and a small whiskey." Chapter 6. Feeling more like myself again, I returned to Fitzgerald's lavish sitting room, carrying a glass of whiskey. Logs crackled in the fireplace, and an eerie light spun around the room. There was an odd sense of the outdoors, as if I were in a pine forest with decaying leaves and mulch underfoot. How peculiar, I thought, to be in the center of London, one of the most advanced cities in the world, and yet have the sense of being elsewhere. I thus went a few times to adjust my vision to the faint shutters of light. As before, 3 other men were in the room. Professor Henry Fitzgerald, Holmes, and a gaunt fellow whom I didn't recognize. Holmes stood up as I entered the room, clasped my hand, and led me to a chair adorned with carvings of beasts that I couldn't identify. Unlike the multi-limbed creatures in the paintings, these were beasts of the ocean, where they possessed all manners of fins, fishtails, and jelly-like tendrils. One looked like a sphere of coral with 2 flat eyes and a blowhole, another like a whale that had grown tentacles on its head and at the base of its tail. The carved beast seemed almost alive, as if they pulsed on the arms of my chair. I stared at them for what must have been too long, but when I broke free and looked at Holmes, he narrowed his eyes as if he were assessing my state of mind. Abruptly, he flashed a smile at me, and his eyes widened. "You have awakened, Dr. Watson," he said. "Excellent. You look much better than when you left us. Please make yourself comfortable, and let me introduce Mr. Christopher Baylor, who claims that his father was murdered by a chair." My friend's words betrayed no irony. Quite serious. Looking down, I was gripped by sudden anxiousness and moved to rise, my eyes riveted again to the arms of the chair, but Holmes laid a steady hand on my shoulder and nudged me back down. "It's just my imagination," I thought, taking a deep breath. "She ain't let it run away with me." "Remain calm," Holmes said as if reading my thoughts. "Your nerves are jittery, dear fellow. You must still be recovering from the tram incident. I assure you that the furniture in this room has no murderous intent. The chair that killed Amos Baylor, you were to believe the account of, was of a particular nature." Gamer chairs are getting serious? Not wrong. Look, okay, side note, as an aside, I had a gamer chair. I had one. Keyword. Because that shit... Okay, let me give you my opinion about gamer chairs real quick. Gamer chairs, in my opinion, strictly, are ass. They're not that great. Thank you, Borger. Appreciate the head pats. But yeah, no, the gamer chair that I had, it was so badly constructed for... Because I have back problems. I mean, what streamer, VTuber doesn't have back problems, right? So I got an office chair. I got a sturdy-ass office chair, and I'm sitting in an office chair. And I feel comfy as fuck. So if you guys want to stream, whatever, get an office chair. It's so much better for you. But anyway, back to the story. I clasped my hands on my lap, holding them tight so Holmes would not see them shaking. Steadying my nerves, I focused carefully. The sensation had passed. The pulsing had ceased. "Watson?" I managed to smile. "I'm fine, Holmes," I said, turning to my attention to the visitor, who was squirming in the chair vacated earlier by Harold Bentley. He held a glass in one hand. "Mr. I started, then paused. This was no grown man. Rather, this was a youth. I don't have a gaming chair. I either sit in a folding chair with my laptop on my bed when I record, or I'm laying in my bed with pillows propping me up against the wall with a pillow on my lap. Yeah, like, you don't... Like, that's the thing that people don't understand. It's like, you don't necessarily have to have a gamer chair to, like, stream or, you know, enjoy and entertain yourself. I use a folding chair at some points, too. Like, I would have my iPad propped up, and that's how I would stream sometimes. But yeah, rather, this was a youth, perhaps 15 years old. But as I didn't want to insult him or at our first meeting, I continued as I'd started. Mr. Baylor, I'm delighted to make your acquaintance. I stood and bowed slightly. He nodded, and his eyes met mine. Briefly, I shook his free hand and sat again. Baylor wore a lumpy black hat that perched on the back of his head. When he spoke, it was with a high-pitched twang. Been anxious for you to hear my story, the young man said. You were knocked out? Holmes glanced in my direction, raised his eyebrows, and shrugged, indicating that he wanted me to answer the boy. I was knocked out, yes, I said, but not for long. Before the boy could answer, Henry Fitzgerald spoke up. Please continue with your account, young man, he said, waving his cigarette. You claim that a chair killed your father, Amos Baylor, did you not? He shot us a look that combined amusement with scorn. That seems highly unlikely. Might it have been a hallucination? Perhaps you should tell us exactly what you think you saw. You need to assert that a piece of furniture committed the act. Well, then perhaps we can acquire some help for you, he continued, his tone annoying, placating. We have some good local facilities, though. Whitechapel Lunatic Asylum, for example. Fitzgerald leaned against the fireplace and flicked ashes on the logs. The boy gulped liquid from the gold-embossed glass and returned it to an ornately carved side table that stood between us. He appeared to be agitated, but kept it under control. I don't need an asylum, Professor. No, I do not, he said. I saw what I saw, and I swear to it. Please, let us proceed with open minds, Holmes said, gesturing for Fitzgerald to remain silent. Right, tell us what you perceived, Christopher, and we shall respect what you tell us. Christopher Baylor nodded at Holmes as if in thanks, and hitched up trousers sewed from rough black cloth that snapped its braces. The top of each strap, 3 yellow cat heads bared sharp teeth. This was a puzzling sort of ornamentation, and one I'd never seen before. Please tell us what happened, young man, I said, taking a sip of the whiskey. I promise, neither Holmes nor I will judge you. Make sure the music's not over. Okay, we're still good. My friend turned his head away from the boy, who seemed not to notice. He puffed on his pipe, waiting in the smoke curled into the ghostly light emanating from the fireplace. When Christopher remained silent, collecting his thoughts or perhaps his courage, Holmes put down the pipe, steepled his fingers, and leaned forward. The boy had his full attention. Let me help you get started, Christopher, he said softly. You are descended from the finest furniture makers near Shropshire. How can you guess so much from small talk? I asked, astounded. Holmes beamed. Look at his braces, Dr. Watson. Christopher Baylor's cheeks flushed. He touched the yellow cat heads. Those are loggerheads. Are they not? Holmes asked. Yes, loggerheads, the young man answered. Though I wonder how you know. His eyes were wide. The leopard's faces are called loggerheads, which are the unofficial symbols of South Shropshire, are they not? Christopher nodded. This is common knowledge, Holmes said. Common knowledge if you happen to be Sherlock Holmes, I thought. Cleared my throat. Bravo, Fitzgerald exclaimed. Pray, continue, Mr. Holmes. Happy to oblige, Professor. Young Christopher has said that he is a furniture maker, and I hazard to guess that he is quite the craftsman. Holmes addressed the boy again. Your father, as well as his father before him, were also the makers of fine furniture. And I hazard to guess that he is quite the craftsman. Your family obtained wood from the Clun Forest region, though perhaps now you obtain it from other forests. And tell us how you deduce these facts, Mr. Holmes. Fitzgerald had returned to the chair he'd occupied when Harold Bentley was present. He seemed highly amused by Holmes' deductions. His large black eyes glowed. The corners of his mouth curved upward. He casually crossed his legs and leaned back on the plump upholstery. It's elementary, Holmes pointed at Christopher's boots, which were scuffed and cracked. Clearly, you are a workman. Sawdust is caked in the cracks of your boots. In the fact, sawdust is thick on the tops of your boots where your foot join your ankles. In addition, Holmes gestured at the boy's hands, your skin is tough, like hide. It's stained brown. That's wood stain, Watson. The boy squirmed, seeming uncomfortable at being the center of so much attention. I see. I sipped my whiskey, trying to look nonchalant. Marvelous! Bravo! Fitzgerald cried. Hello, FG. Good morning. Or evening, for you. We are on Chapter 6 of Sherlock Holmes vs. Cthulhu. They are investigating a 15-year-old boy who claims that his father was killed by a chair. Let's continue. You, Dr. Watson, should already know these facts, as they require only the simplest of deductions. Tell me, have you noticed the slivers of wood embedded in Christopher's palms? Why no, Holmes, I said. How could I? The room is too dark. Christopher Baylor turned his hands over and stared at his palms. You're right, sir, said the Holmes, whose sharp eyes bored into me. Yes, I'm reading Sherlock Holmes versus Cthulhu, The Adventure of the Deadly Dimensions by Lewis H. Gresh. So we're doing a little ASMR reading time for a little bit. I'll probably read until the end of this video and maybe like 30 seconds or 30 minutes of the other one. Yep, Sherlock versus Cthulhu. It is a thing. It's interesting. The fuck? I know. Listen. It's pretty interesting so far. In all fairness, I've known for a long time that some of England's finest chairs have been crafted from coppish ash obtained in Shropshire's old Clunforce, no doubt. Amos Baylor's hands were rougher than his son's, probably as tough as elephant hide. At that, tears sprung into Christopher's eyes. Please, the boy said, and his voice cracked. That is enough, Mr. Holmes. I can barely stand to remember. I am sorry, Holmes said, his voice softening. We must face what has happened, mustn't we? The boy flinched, and Holmes lowered his voice yet more. No doubt you're reeling from the loss of your father, he continued. His death. His murder. We can't bring him back, but we can find his killer, and this may bring you some peace. Shall we proceed to the reason for your visit, then, so I may help you discover who committed the heinous act? Christopher Baylor swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, I came because my father, murdered as you say, but I know who did it. My father was murdered by his own handiwork. Ripped to shreds he was. It sounds crazy, I know it does, but I am sure of what to tell you. Christopher was far more composed than I might have been in his position. Whatever had occurred, his father was dead. The fact was unescapable. For all we knew, the boy was an orphan. He was upset, but calm enough. Perhaps accustomed to hard times. Gently, I squeezed his arm, urging him to continue. My father's working in the barn, the special barn, on the chair of no dimensions, as he liked to call it. It was a special Baylor chair, one that would make us famous as the finest furniture makers in all of England. We're closer to Avebury now, by the way, than to Shropshire itself. Well, I was in the barn with my father, who was singing his terrible songs. I left for the house, where I fell asleep. When I returned later, my father... Christopher broke off and wiped his nose on his sleeve, reminding me of Willie Jacobs. Holmes leaped forward, elbows on his knees, gray eyes riveted to the boy. Every detail matters, he said. Please go on. When my father was singing last I saw him, and the next, he was gone. Singing terrible songs, was he? And right before the incident. Interesting, Holmes said quietly and then abruptly. By what do you mean, gone? You see his body? His corpse? And tell me about these songs. What makes them terrible? The boy cringed, then burst out crying. So much for his composure, I thought. Been holding back tears, braving it like a man. I had lost my own father as a young lad. He died in the war between British India and Bhutan. Our mother died of grief and consumption shortly thereafter. Like Christopher Baylor, after my father died, I tried to be strong, but late at night when nobody could hear me, I'd shed a few tears too. I remember now the relief those tears have brought. When my mother died, I didn't even try to be strong. No, I just wept openly when I came home and found her on the kitchen floor. I grew tougher, though, and quickly, and never spoke of my family. The what? There's a messed up visual novel, good story about gory sexual hentai and lolly, but it's great psychological show, only playing the sex scenes of a lolly. Yeah, no, that sounds pretty icky. That does kind of like ruin things, right? Like you find some good visual novels, and then it's like, oh, by the way, lolly, and it's like, bruh, why you like this? Let me do this real quick. I need to change this. You can choose an edited version that doesn't show that stuff. Good. That would be much appreciated. Let me change to a different one. There we go. Exactly. Why not have that character at a proper adult age? Because reasons. Okay. Where were we? Now, as a man, it was easier to hold my emotions in check and stifle bad memories. As quickly as unpleasant memories came to mind, I could dismiss them. Someday, young Christopher would be able to do the same. I gave the boy a square of cloth from my pocket, and he wiped his nose again, muttering a thank you. Then he continued speaking. As I returned to the house that night, leaving my father alone in the barn, the sky was shivering and glaring, and some rain was falling. It was a violent storm. My father was singing, yes, but not any song you would know. He was shrieking horrible things. As if in pain, I asked. No, sir. He was shrieking in the elder language, streams of garbled syllables and patterns, not in pain and glee, but horrible things, you see. Such as? I prompted. The usual, Dr. Watson. That type of shrieking. Seriously, I can't read it. It's like the garbled, Lovecraftian jargon. Like a madman who thinks he's seeing God or the heavens. Something, you see. Yeah, no, I feel that, Lunar. Across the room, Fitzgerald flinched. No, sir. I do not, Christopher said quickly. I didn't sleep much. The storm woke me. It was all night, and I hastened back to the barn to get my father and urge him to get some sleep as well, but he was already murdered, sirs. All I found of him were his bones, stacked, all unnatural. The bones, they should have fallen, stacked as they were, but they sat there, all heaped everywhere and sticking out in all directions. And then there was this round bone too, and it was all knifed, you see, carved, whittled with wee pictures. I don't know. And my father, his blood, his innards, his brains, it was all scattered everywhere in the barn. Do you see any weapons near your father? Holmes asked. No. Tools that could have been used to kill him in such a manner? My great-grandfather's plank saw was by a stack of bones. Was there blood on it? No. Any other tools nearby? Of course, the boy said. On my father's workbench on the floor were a two-man coachmaker saw, a farm saw, a tang, a mortise chisel, jigger, shaving block, all sorts of hammers, a burl mallet, carpenter's mallet, veneer hammer, axes? The boys nodded. Of course, all sorts. Mortise axes, chisel axes. So everything was in its place, as you might expect to find all of your father's tools, Holmes asked. Nothing moved? Nothing missing. No blood on any of the tools? None. Sorry to ask this, I said, but are you certain that what you saw, the gore, the innards, the bones, and the rest, are you certain, Christopher, that this was your father? Excellent question, Watson, Holmes exclaimed. A surge of pride swept through me, but it was quickly replaced by shame, for I was in the presence of the victim's son, and pride had no place here. I'm sure you could have pronounced the Eldritch speech. Oh, buddy. Let me, I'm going to type it out for you, what the Eldritch speech is. Let me type this out. EBB. God. There you go. That's what it looked like. I'm certain that it was my father, yes. His clothes were shredded but intact enough. His braces with the loggerheads. His hair, which was also, you just listen to that song suggested or watch that flash animation. What'd you think? I didn't mind it. I liked it. His hair, which was an odd color of copper, bright and shiny like the metal itself. His hair was slung by the wall, all limp-like, tattered and torn. His wedding ring was on. The boy lowered his head. The rest of his words were muffled. The wedding ring, a special one, only he and my ma had. serpents and eyes on them, loggerheads carved in the inner curves. The ring was on my father's brains. How awful, I thought. Who would do such a heinous thing and why? Only a monster, I thought. Only a monster. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something odd. Gerald's hands started twitching. He dropped his cigarette and quickly stamped it out, leaving a burned mess in the fine Persian rug. He seemed not to care whether it did permanent damage. Holmes hammered on. Was the air heavy in the barn? No. Was the air unusually hot or cold? No. Did you see odd shadows that appeared unnatural in any way? No. Oh, thanks. Thank you, Lunar. Does your father have any enemies? Holmes continued. We Baylors are cursed, the boy said bitterly. We have no friends, only enemies. People avoid us like we don't exist. Thank you, Borger. Appreciate the love. Okay. So, oh, drop my phone. My bad. 1 second. Oh, I forgot to do this. I'm so dumb. 1 second. Take this. I keep doing this to make it show that for people who don't tune in, who don't realize that, like, I sent out the tweet that I'm live, that I need to change my username real fast. That way people can see that I'm still, you know, live, obviously. So. Oop. Bye-bye. B. Ba. B. Ba. B. Ba. Ah? Alright, where were we? Back up. People avoid us like we don't exist. We've been cursed down to generations forever. Why is this? Holmes asked. Because of the chanting, the loggerheads, the ways the Baylors, Mennonites were my ancestors, Mr. Holmes. We were few long ago, and most people assumed that we were stamped out. For generations, we hid to avoid persecution, and still we don't have ourselves known, but for different reasons now. Baylors have drawings etched on bones hundreds of years ago by my ancestors, passed down from father to son. We followed the instructions, he continued. The drawings, we know not why they work as they do, but they produce chairs and tables and even barns of finest dimension, a special like no other. Father made the cherry divan of special dimensions for Lord Wiltshire, and made a table for Lord Ashburton. No one else could have done it. I don't understand. Why would people be so afraid of furniture and other constructions that they would shun an entire family for generations? Holmes looked equally perplexed. What exactly scares people about the things you make, Christopher? The boy hesitated before answering. They aren't of this world, these things. He uttered the words slowly and so quietly I barely heard them. And his eyes rose to mine and they were glazed and hard as if he'd entered some sort of trance. Fine tremor swept through his body like soft waves in the sea. Were the drugs? A toxic substance? Family dementia? Never had I seen a person switch so rapidly. Do you really spawn a stepladder anywhere at any time? Yeah, no, that would be horrifying. Holmes barked a laugh and jumped to his feet. His eyes flashed and he snapped his fingers a mere inch from the boy's face. Control yourself, Mr. Baylor, he said. There is nothing that is not of this world. The boy blinked and his eyes warmed again. He swept the black hair from his forehead and I could see sweat glistening there. He removed the lumpy black hat from his head and fanned himself with it. His body still trembled. Holmes returned to his seat. Only a few more questions, he said in reassuring tone. It will be done soon. Now, is there a machine near the barn? Something made of metal, perhaps with gears, cables, and pipes? No, sir. You find any marks outside the barn, wheel tracks in the mud, for example, or footprints you don't recognize? I saw nothing, Mr. Holmes, but I didn't look. For a moment, Holmes was silent. Fitzgerald studied them both, and a slight smile appeared on his face. Where's your father now? Holmes asked. The police forced me to bury him. What was left of him, that is. Where? And in the nether corner of the Avebury Cemetery. Unmarked grave, they told me. No coffin, nothing. They wouldn't allow anything. They gave him no dignity. What did you bury? Everything? Bones? Brains? All of it? A pause. Then quietly. Yes. One more thing, Holmes said. Was your father a strong man? At this, the boy's eyes lit up. He was indeed, Mr. Holmes. 6'5" and stronger than any fighter I'd ever known. See? Holmes' voice drifted off. Professor Fitzgerald remained oddly quiet throughout Holmes' interview of Christopher Baylor. The room grew silent except for the crackling of the logs, and as the shadows stretched and the light thinned, the man said nothing, just smoked another cigarette, letting the stub burn down to his fingers. The haze was thick with the sweetness of Holmes' pipe and stench of the professor's tobacco, overwhelming the pine and malt scent I had noticed earlier. Fitzgerald saw me staring at him. He smiled and pulled the bell string by his seat. I believe our young visitor's in need of food and drink, Dr. Watson, wouldn't you say? We have no time for pleasantries, Holmes said. Holmes, I said, the boy is clearly famished and in poor condition. I wouldn't mind eating something, Christopher piped up. The maid entered and Fitzgerald requested sandwiches, cake, and tea, then as an afterthought, brandy. He left, and we all sat quietly, lost in our own thoughts as we waited for her to return. Christopher began humming, and it was an odd melody, a tuneless tune, as if such a thing could exist. As quickly as he began humming, the sound mutated and he started to sing, except that his words were of no language I'd ever heard. It was sheer gibberish. Trembling, he seemed to become oblivious to his surroundings, and his high-pitched twang soared into octaves no human voice should be able to hit. It skidded across notes so high they didn't exist on any musical instrument I'd ever heard. Thalgen Fagen Neuchlingen nicht Skych. Thalgen Fagen nicht Skych. Without warning, Fitzgerald stiffened. Stop it, he cried. Christopher stopped in mid-garble. The professor raced the boy and shoved him hard against the back of the chair. What's the matter with you that you would sing such a song in my house? He demanded. His voice low and threatening. Just a minute, I started to say. Get your hands off me! Christopher pushed Fitzgerald away. The man stumbled and nearly fell. The boy leapt up angry, no longer trembling at all. His eyes were hard and glazed again. Holmes and I exchanged a glance. Was this boy capable of aggression? Violence? Even murder? Was I singing it? Christopher said. Do you know it, Professor? Do you? Fitzgerald was taken to his chair and went limp. His arms splayed over the arms of the chair with his legs spread widely. It, he muttered. Do I know it? Why, that's rich. He burst out laughing. At that moment, the maid returned with a tray and sat on the table between Holmes and the professor, both of whom ignored her. She bowed and hurried away. Nobody touched the food and drink. Time for our young guest to get some sleep, Fitzgerald said abruptly. Take some sandwiches and cake, boy. Stay here tonight. We'll give you a room, and we'll get you back to Avebury in the morning. Come along. Here's the boy, who flinched at first. The professor hoisted Christopher up and escorted him down the hall in the direction the maid had gone. The food remained untouched upon the table. Rather an abrupt departure, wouldn't you say? Holmes muttered. The professor didn't even stop to let the boy take the very food he offered. Tell me, what do you make of all this, Watson? I can't say that the evening's entertainment, even with a musical score, was terribly uplifting, or even remotely pleasant. It was intriguing, though. Makes no sense that, Holmes chuckled. And the murder of Baylor's father? That makes no sense at all. Somehow the killer got into the barn and murdered a man without leaving any trace of himself. Although, I added, gaining entry likely would have been simple, I suppose, and the killer might have brought his own weapons, then left with them. Motive? Anything, Holmes. Another maker of fine furniture who wanted to kill his competition, maybe a dispute over payment, or jealousy. Perhaps Baylor's father had an affair with another man's wife. Certainly there seems to be anger enough directed at his family. Holmes stuck his now cold pipe into his pocket and stood. Perhaps an ordinary motive was at play, he said, but I think not. What makes you say that? I asked. An ordinary motive doesn't explain hacking a man to pieces, heaping his organs around the room, and stacking his bones in strange ways. Let us not overlook the spherical bones and symbols, not to mention the odd songs of the evening and Professor Fitzgerald's reaction. This case is anything but ordinary, Watson. Holmes' points made sense as usual. Why would a maker of chairs murder a competitor in such a deranged fashion? While a jealous husband might conceivably hack a man to death, it would be a crime of passion. He wouldn't heap the gore in exotic ways. And then there were the spherical bones, a tangible link to the case of Willie Jacobs. That sent a tremor through my body. No, Holmes was right. We were up against something in which the motive was, as yet, entirely unknown. Despite all the previous cases we investigated together, we'd yet to encounter anything like this one. That moment I was anxious to return to Mary and Samuel, and I was also tired and still felt weak. As I stood and straightened my jacket, to my surprise, Holmes threw himself onto the rug and began digging through the fibers under Christopher's chair. "What are you doing?" I exclaimed. "Ha!" Holmes exclaimed jubilantly as he plucked something from my rug and jumped up. Between his forefinger and thumb was a fragment of what appeared to be yellow parchment. "I knew it!" he cried. "I saw something fall from the boy's pocket as he left with Fitzgerald. It was small and the room was dark, but I saw something fall, Watson, and here it is." While Holmes examined his great find, the piece of parchment, I gathered my walking stick, overcoat, and other personal items. "It is not paper, Watson," he said, tucking into the pocket of his jacket. "No, it is ancient animal hide. And upon this scrap of ancient hide is a stroke of ink or some other stain, possibly blood. The lab will prove me correct. And now we shall take our leave." He retrieved his own coat. "Come," he moved to the door, and I followed my friend into the night, where we clambered into a carriage. "Must be some connection, Watson," he said, as he took a seat. "Perhaps Theodore Jacobs and Amos Baylor were being punished for crimes committed against a common enemy. Who could that be? There must be a connection between the two murdered men. Nothing else makes sense. The murders are so similar. Just who or what had these men offended?" I was fatigued and already dozing off. "Tomorrow," I murmured. "We'll talk about it again tomorrow." The carriage bumped along. A tuneless, high-pitched song ran through my mind. The rhythm wasn't 4/4 or 3/4 or any other known musical beat. Oddly, the song and its garbled syllables felt natural to me. I felt comforted and fell asleep with what was now a beautiful song, playing over and over in the backdrop of my dreams. Dalgan Thathengirdin Neogalethin Dechyanan. Chapter 7. I dashed from the carriage toward the building. The rain was fierce now, pellets battering me, and I pulled my hat low over my forehead to protect my eyes. As I reached for the doorknob, I remembered Lestrade's promise to protect my family, and I peered over my shoulder. The gas lamps illuminated the rain and heavy fog. If the police were hiding in the dark, watching, I could not tell. Yet I needed to know, so I stood there, cold and wet, peering into the night, until there, just to the right of the building, across from mine, in the narrow space beneath the overhang, I saw the dim outline of a man. Umbrella, long coat. Hopefully he was a policeman, not a criminal hell-bent on hurting Mary and Samuel. If indeed the shadow object I saw was even a man. Vaguely reassured, I twisted the knob and stepped quickly inside. It was blissfully warm. I bounded up the short flight of stairs to my flat. The sitting room was dark. Light juddered in the hall by the bedroom. I wanted to tell Mary that I was home. I wanted to clasp Samuel close, but I trod softly and didn't wake them. Happiness welled up, such as I never felt in either circumstances. Not when I was with Sherlock Holmes, not on the hunt for madmen far away in the remote corners of our great country. No, only when reunited with my family. In the bedroom, the fire simmered on the blackened logs. Strands of light curled up the walls and across the ceiling. There in the tiny bed, a soft orange played across the baby's face. I stroked his fat fingers and cheeks, and for a moment he stirred. Slipping into the dressing room, I donned my night clothes, and then, as quietly as I could, slid beneath the covers beside my wife. Her golden hair was soft and smelled of lemons. I felt her heartbeat. Content, I began to sink into sleep. Then, as a sapling takes root, a song dug its way into my mind and took hold. It was a popular song, Little Annie Rooney, by Michael Nolan. At first I thought, how delightful, and hoped it would lull me to sleep. A moment. But then something was off about the song. It was as if a vine had caught hold of a sapling and tried to strangle it. The melody was in E minor, with its F sharp, rather than the typical E flat major with its E, B, and A flats. I recognized the key because I'd listened to Holmes play his violin hour upon hour, and I'd endured his lengthy dissertations about music theory. The lyrics were mostly intact, but here and there sprinkled with words I'd never heard, could not utter even if I tried. Even in my semi-lucid state, I knew that no man could possibly pronounce what I heard in my mind. She's my sinkinich. I'm her ich. Soon will die near to part. It was a bizarre fashion, human and inhuman. She tried to warn me, tried to explain. Her children were not meant to be plain. The tune became more discordant, so the lyrics were increasingly corrupted. After the stars are gone, after the stars are gone. Falgen, Fagen, Burden Nungothin, Nigam Sakya. Wake up, Mary cried. You're screaming in your sleep. Wake up. Samuel was crying, and his flailing limbs came into view. Mary bent over me, baby in her right arm, banging my shoulder with her free hand. She looked terrified, and the room was whirling. It was still night. Taking hold of my senses, I bolted upright. The song melted away. Mary, are you all right? Of course, John, she replied, calmer now. You were screaming. What's wrong? Did I dare tell her? No, it was only a bad dream, not worth mentioning. Nothing, I said. Perhaps a nightmare, she suggested, then turned her attention to Samuel. She nursed him, and after a few minutes, he settled, whimpering, and fell back to sleep. Then Mary twisted toward me. John, where have you been? She asked hesitantly, as if reluctant to hear my answer. Recuperating, I said. I helped. I know that you were not well. I visited you at Professor Fitzgerald's house while you were unconscious. Mr. Holmes sent word. I nodded, but why did you ask? I know you were knocked out at the tram wreckage. It was all in the paper, she added. I felt it best for you to remain at Professor Fitzgerald's home under Dr. Stoutgarden's care. Mr. Holmes agreed. Anywhere else, even at a hospital, your care wouldn't have been as good. I'd worked at many of London's hospitals, and I knew she was right. Our medical facilities were overcrowded, underattended, and not as antiseptic as I might have liked. That worked. But John, she said, I raised my eyebrows. Where have you been? Mr. Holmes sent word that you had awakened and were well, that I was not to worry, yet I did worry, and a great deal. That was many, many hours ago. After my health was restored, why had I not at once returned home to her and Samuel? Perhaps I should have come straight away and not spent time with Holmes interviewing Christopher Baylor. We had a visitor at Fitzgerald's, I said. A man whose father died in a manner strongly resembling the way that Willie Jacobs' father died. I told her the whole story, and as I did, her face softened. Yet, if anything, she was more afraid for me now. John, you sent word for me and I came to the cigar shop, but I couldn't find you. When the fire broke out, I ran. Seeking transport for home, I returned to the main roads where police brought me to Mr. Holmes. He made sure that Samuel and I returned here safely. Yet, John, why did you send for me at all? Dare I tell her that it had not been at my request that she'd been lured to the East End? My note to you. The note. I groped for an explanation that would calm her when abruptly she cut me off. You must cut your ties with Sherlock Holmes, she said, for your sake and for ours. I found that I could not answer. I had planned to tell Mary about Moriarty, yet now I held my tongue. This was one of the most important cases. One of the most serious crimes that London had ever seen. I could not let Holmes down. I did not want to fight with my wife, nor did I wish for her to be frightened. We do our best as men, but we are only mortal beings, flesh and blood. We are prone to errors of judgment. Perhaps I should have told her about Moriarty. She had a right to know that she and Samuel might be in danger. By shielding her, was I doing her a disservice? Certainly, I thought. He was safe with Lestrade's man outside the flat, watching everyone who came and went. In the morning, I would make sure that I indeed seen a policeman across the street rather than a shadow, a trick of my imagination. Tonight, however, all was secure. What could possibly happen with me at home? So I gave her the platitudes. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Everything will be fine, I'll be careful. Yet she seemed unconvinced, so I offered what I thought she wanted to hear most. Mary, you always come first. Yay! Thank you, Borger! After a moment, she tucked her legs back beneath the blankets, rolled to her side so her back was facing me. I'm not so sure, John, she said. Do I come first? Or is it Sherlock Holmes? Shocked, I put my hand on her shoulder and gently tugged until she rolled over and I could see her expression. Oh, John, she said. And her eyes filled with tears. It nearly broke my heart. You and Samuel always come first, I said, and I meant it. I've been lonely before Mary. Lost. Even with Holmes as my friend and fellow adventurer, I'd had no solace late at night. When I couldn't sleep, the only sounds that had penetrated the nothingness were the beating of my own heart and the occasional bark of a dog. At such times, I felt empty and found myself thinking, is this all there is? This is what my life was like before Mary. I never wanted to lie to her. I never wanted to hurt her. Would you stop going off with Holmes if I insisted? She asked. I took my hand off her shoulder. I cringed, and she noticed. Well then, that's my answer, she said. No, I said quickly, that's not your answer. I hesitated. You will always come first, I repeated, and if you insist, I will reluctantly and very sadly comply. It was she who hesitated this time. I won't insist, she said softly. Your happiness is important to me, John, but just be more careful. I don't think I could bear to live without you. She wrapped her arm over me then and snuggled close. I felt like the world's biggest scoundrel. In the morning, I would return to the tram machine building to hope Holmes examine what was left at the crime scene. As much as I was flooded with guilt, I also knew that in the morning I would tell Mary that I was going to my practice with a fully booked slate of patients to see. If she came calling, my nurse would divert any questions Mary posed. Where was I? Would my wife see me? No. I was busy with a patient. Or I was out, getting medical supplies, or conferring with a fellow doctor. These were harmless lies, weren't they? I knew my duties and I met my obligations, but to be happy, just to be content, I had to be myself. That required more in my daily life than meat pies, walks, and the whining of patients with sore throats. If I couldn't be who I was at the core, if I couldn't help Holmes with his puzzles, if I couldn't chronicle his adventures and be enlightened and astounded by his intelligence and his knowledge, if I had to give up all of that, then what kind of husband would I be to Mary? The night grew still. Our baby whimpered. I heard the beating of my own heart, and I felt Mary's heart where her breast pressed against my back. The terrible off-key song roiled in my mind. She's my Cynthia. I'm her Yura. Soon we'll die, near to part. I dreamed that I was back in the luxurious bedroom of Professor Fitzgerald's house. I dreamed, or perhaps I remembered, what had transpired that night when I'd slipped in and out of consciousness. Dead of night, head hurting, body weak, leg numb. Tram burning, flesh melting, people screaming. In the outer room, Fitzgerald sang Italian opera in baritone while a single soprano and two mezzos harmonized. They clinked glasses, they laughed, and women's voices were so soft and lilting that I imagined his companions to be young and in their prime. I drifted in and out of sleep that night. Head hurting, body weak, leg numb. Screaming mother, dead child, Mary's face looming, crying. They sang together all night it seemed, until finally I heard gay chatter and doors closing, and then Fitzgerald sang alone. He sang until the sun trickled through the shutters, but it was no longer Italian opera. The melody had changed, and for hours his baritone lifted to an odd lilt, off-key, eerie keening, sounds that no human voice should be able to achieve. After the stars are gone, after the stars are gone. Falgun, Fagen, Yer, Nogaleth, Din, Dikya. I bolted upright. The sun dribbled through Mary's flowered curtains and cast pink hues around the room. I was sweating, cold. There, a shadow up by the ceiling, wavering, long fingers of dark reaching toward me. I shrank back beneath the covers, head on my pillow, blanket clinched to my chin. Dark fingers stretched, thin and curled around the morning light, coiled around it, choking it as a boa constricts and strangles the life from its prey. The pink hues died. Only shadows remained. Darkness clutched the bed. I jumped up and ran to the window, whipped back the curtains. Let the light come in. Let the sun come and drench the darkness, quell it, kill it. But there was no sun. It was overcast, the heavy clouds threatening rain. The fog thick. Flash of lightning illuminated the tops of the buildings across the way. I'd been through a traumatic experience, and was often the case with victims of trauma. I was having nightmares. Surely there was something more to it. I felt almost silly. Long fingers of dark reaching for me in my bed. Ludicrous! I had to get a grip. Mary and Samuel still slept, but not for long. I knew soon the baby would cry for his milk. Quietly and quickly, I took my leave. Checked for a policeman out front, and yes, he was there. And I assumed that he was one of Lestrade's men. I saw his conical hat, the glimmer of standard-issue metal buttons on his uniform. My family would be safe. As for me, I was off to the East End, into danger. My heart beat more quickly. I felt alive. Under the flash of lightning, the cold in the sky split open as if by knife and dumped its rain. Cold, chilling, but I didn't care. I needed to work out how to shut down the tram machine. I needed to know the truth behind the mysterious Moriarty's actions. I needed to prevent more. And with that, we are done. We will resume Sherlock Holmes vs. Cthulhu at a later point. Thank y'all for tuning in. We're still gonna stream. We still got another hour and a half to stream. But what we're going to do is that we're going to switch games here. So let me look up what to play for y'all. Probably still keep with the spooky theme. So let's see what we got. You have a good reading voice? Thank you, Lunar. I'm trying to do more with reading for y'all. But yeah, Sherlock Holmes was actually voted on to read a while back ago, so I'm just continuing it because hey, it's spooky. But I don't mind reading light novels or other books to y'all. So like I have plenty of anime stuff that we could read, right? So let's see what we can play. Um Excuse me. I think we are just going to play. Like, a part of me wants to play Apex, but I don't know. I know y'all might be tired of it. Aw. You know what? You know what? I am down for this. You know what? Let's just keep the reading voice. Let's keep the reading voice. Rest stuff like Codex and Furnace, the Savage Ruins Pathfinder, and Warhammer 40k Chaos Demons and Winnie the Pooh on streams. Look, Warhammer stuff is pretty fucking lit, though. So, let's switch over to this one. There we go. Let's make everything smaller. There we go. And let's put the chat box right there. There we go.